Hello, listening squirrels. A crazy place here. Oh, I can't wait for y'all to see. This is my new Ruana that I got from Darn Good Yarn. It's this. And I got it yesterday, which was Sunday, on my birthday. The Raglan Recycled Ruana. Can never see that right. And it had a price tag of $44.99, but I got a big deal on it. I forget now what, but it was good, or I wouldn't have gotten it. Chapter 18 is called A War Wedding. I can tell you this, Dr. Dear, said Susan, pale with wrath, that Germany is getting to be perfectly ridiculous. They were all in the big Ingleside kitchen. Susan was mixing biscuits for supper. Mrs. Blythe was making shortbread for Jim, and Rilla was compounding candy for Ken and Walter. It had once been Walter and Ken. In her thoughts, but somehow quite unconsciously, this had changed until Ken's name came naturally first. Cousin Sophia was also there knitting. All the boys were going to be killed in the long run, so Cousin Sophia felt in her bones, but they might better die with warm feet than cold ones, so Cousin Sophia knitted faithfully and gloomily. What a terrible thought. Into this peaceful scene erupted the doctor, wrathful and excited over the burning of the Parliament buildings in Ottawa, and Susan became automatically quite as wrathful and excited. "What will those Huns do next?" she demanded. "Coming over here and burning our Parliament building. Did anyone ever hear of such an outrage?" "We don't know that the Germans are responsible for this," said the doctor, much as if he felt quite sure they were. "Fires do start without their agency sometimes, and Uncle Mark McAllister's barn was burnt last week. You can hardly accuse the Germans of that, Susan." "Indeed, Dr. Dear, I do not know." Susan nodded slowly and portentously. "Whiskers on the Moon was there that very day. The fire broke out half an hour after he was gone. So much is a fact, but I shall not accuse a Presbyterian elder of burning anybody's barn until I have proof. However, everybody knows, Dr. Dear, that both Uncle Mark's boys have enlisted, and that Uncle Mark himself makes speeches at all the recruiting meetings, so no doubt Germany is anxious to get square with him." "I could never speak at a recruiting meeting," said Cousin Sophia solemnly. "I could never reconcile it to my conscience to ask another woman's son to go, to murder and to be murdered." "Could you not?" said Susan. "Well, Sophia Crawford, I felt as if I could ask anyone to go, and I read last night that there were no children under 8 years of age left alive in Poland. Think of that, Sophia Crawford." Susan shook a floury finger at Sophia. "Not one child under 8 years of age." "I suppose the Germans has ate 'em all, sighed Cousin Sophia. "Well, no," said Susan reluctantly, as if she hated to admit that there was any crime the Huns couldn't be accused of. "The Germans have not turned cannibal yet." No, she did say it. "As far as I know. They have died of starvation and exposure, the poor little creatures. There is murdering for you, Cousin Sophia Crawford." There is murdering for you. "There is murdering for you," I guess is what she said. "The thought of it poisons every bite and sup I take." "I see that Fred Carson of Lowbridge has been awarded a Distinguished Conduct Medal," remarked the doctor over his local paper. "I heard that last week," said Susan. "He's a battalion runner, and he did something extra brave and daring. His letter telling his folks about it came when his old grandmother Carson was on her dying bed." They always say dying bed, not deathbed. Just a difference. She had only a few more minutes to live, and the Episcopal minister who was there asked her if she would not like him to pray. "Oh, yes, yes, you can pray," she said, impatient-like. She was a dean, Dr. dear, and the deans were always high-spirited. "You can pray, but for pity's sake, pray low and don't disturb me. I want to think over the splendid news, and I have not much time left to do it." That was Elmira Carson all over. Fred was the apple of her eye. She was 75 years of age and had not a gray hair in her head, they tell me. "By the way, that reminds me, I found a gray hair this morning, my very first," said Mrs. Blythe. I have noticed that gray hair for some time, Mrs. Dr. dear, but I did not speak of it. Thought I to myself, she has enough to bear, but now that you have discovered it, let me remind you that gray hairs are honorable. "I must be getting old, Gilbert." Mrs. Blythe laughed a trifle ruefully. "People are beginning to tell me I look so young. They never tell you that when you are young. But I shall not worry over my silver thread. I never liked red hair, Gilbert. Did I ever tell you of that time years ago at Green Gables when I dyed my hair? Nobody but Marilla and I knew about it. Was that the reason you came out once with your hair shingled to the bone?" What's that mean? "Yes, I bought a bottle of dye from a German Jew peddler. I fondly expected it would turn my hair black, and it turned it green, so it had to be cut off." "You had a narrow escape, Mrs. Dr. dear," exclaimed Susan. "Of course you were too young then to know what a German was. It was a special mercy of Providence that was only green dye and not poison." "It seems hundreds of years since those Green Gable days," sighed Mrs. Blythe. "They belong to another world altogether. Life has been cut in two by the chasm of the war. What's ahead, I don't know, but it can't be a bit like the past. I wonder if those of us who've lived half our lives in the old world will ever feel wholly at home in the new." "Have you noticed," asked Miss Oliver, glancing up from her book, "how everything written before the war seems so far away now, too? One feels as if one was reading something as ancient as the Iliad. This poem of Wordsworth, the senior class have it in their entrance work. I've been glancing over it. Its classic calm and repose and the beauty of the lines seem to belong to another planet, and to have as little to do with the present world welter as the evening star. The only thing that I find much comfort in reading nowadays is the Bible," remarked Susan, whisking her biscuits into the oven. "There are so many passages in it that seem to me exactly descriptive of the Huns. Old Highland Sandy declares there's no doubt that the Kaiser is the Antichrist spoken of in Revelations, but I do not go as far as that. It would, in my humble opinion, Mrs. Dr. dear, be too great an honor for him." Early one morning, several days later, Miranda Pryor slipped up to Ingleside, ostensibly to get some Red Cross sewing, but in reality to talk over with sympathetic Rilla troubles that were past bearing alone. She brought her dog with her, an overfed, bandy-legged little animal very dear to her heart because Joe Milgrave had given it to her when it was a puppy. Mr. Pryor regarded all dogs with disfavor, but in those days he had looked kindly upon Joe as a suitor for Miranda's hand, and so he allowed her to keep the puppy. Miranda was so grateful that she endeavored to please her father by naming her dog after his political idol, the great Liberal chieftain Sir Wilfrid Laurier, though his title was soon abbreviated to Wilfie. Sir Wilfrid grew and flourished and waxed fat, but Miranda spoiled him absurdly and nobody else liked him. Rilla especially hated him because of his detestable trick of lying flat on his back and entreating you with waving paws to tickle his sleek stomach. When she saw that Miranda's pale eyes bore unmistakable testimony of her having cried all night, Rilla asked her to come up to her room, knowing Miranda had a tale of woe to tell. But she ordered Sir Wilfrid to remain below. "Oh, can't he come too?" said Miranda wistfully. "Poor Wilfie won't be any bother. I've wiped his paw so carefully before I brought him in. He's always so lonesome in a strange place without me, and very soon he'll be all I'll have left to remind me of Joe." Rilla yielded, and Sir Wilfrid, with his tail curled at a saucy angle over his brindled back, trotted triumphantly up the stairs before them. "Oh, Rilla," sobbed Miranda when they had reached sanctuary, "I'm so unhappy. I can't begin to tell you how unhappy I am. Truly, my heart is breaking." Rilla sat down on the lounge beside her. Sir Wilfrid squatted on his haunches before them with his impertinent pink tongue stuck out and listened. "What's the trouble, Miranda?" "Joe is coming home tonight on his last leave. I had a letter from him on Saturday. He sends my letters in care of Bob Crawford, you know, because of Father. And oh, Rilla, he will only have 4 days. He has to go away Friday morning, and I may never see him again." "Does he still want you to marry him?" asked Rilla. "Oh, yes, he implored me in his letter to run away and be married, but I cannot do that, Rilla. Not even for Joe. My only comfort is that I will be able to see him for a little while tomorrow afternoon. Father has to go to Charlottetown on business. At least we will have one good farewell talk. But oh, afterwards. Why, Rilla, I know Father won't even let me go to the station Friday morning to see Joe off." "Why in the world don't you and Joe get married tomorrow afternoon at home?" demanded Rilla. Miranda swallowed a sob in such amazement that she almost choked. Why, that's impossible, Rilla." "Why?" briefly demanded the organizer of the Junior Red Cross and transporter of babies and soup tureens. Why, we never thought of such a thing. Joe hasn't a license. I have no dress. I couldn't be married in black. Miranda lost herself altogether. And Sir Wilfrid, seeing that she was in dire distress, threw back his head and emitted a melancholy yelp. Rilla Blythe thought hard and rapidly for a few minutes, and then she said, "Miranda, if you will put yourself into my hands, I'll have you married to Joe before 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon." "Oh, you couldn't." "I can, and I will, and you'll have to do exactly as I tell you." "Oh, I don't think. Oh, Father will kill me." "Nonsense. He'll be very angry, I suppose, but are you more afraid of your father's anger than you are of Joe's never coming back to you?" "No," said